In this video, we're going to be working on our dialog UI system, and we're going to add an NPC base class so that we can build out a tutorial NPC to use in one of our test scenes. And on that note, I did add an npc.png into our assets folder, which you can find in the link in the description. And also, if you've been following along, I did switch the sides of my scene and file system with the inspector. Some stuff was getting cut off when I was clicking into certain properties, so I just wanted to switch those. So bear with me if I keep going to the wrong side. First thing we're going to do is start working on our dialog UI scene. So let's go into our scenes, and inside of UI, let's make a new folder. Sorry, some stuff over here might be getting cut off, but I think stuff over on the left is better to have in frame. So we're going to call this dialog. And inside of the dialog, we're going to create two new scenes, or one new scene, and we're also going to attach a script to it. So we're going to call this our dialog UI. It can just be a 2D scene for now. We're going to change that in a moment, but let's also attach a script to it, and we'll come back to this in a moment. Let's go and change the scene type to a canvas layer. And while we're at it, we can also change. This is extending over here, and we'll also just give it a class name. All right, inside of the dialog UI, we are going to have a panel. We're going to have a margin container, which is going to be a child of the panel. Then as a child of the margin container, we're going to have a VBox container. And as a child of the VBox container, we are going to have 3 labels. So we can add one and just Control D twice to update those. And the first one is going to be our name label. The second one is going to be our dialog label. And the third one is going to be our continue label. So let's jump into the 2D view here. Just going to zoom in a little bit. And we can go back to our panel. We're just going to do a little bit of setup right now. So we're going to go into our layout, and we're going to make this a minimum size of 400 and 150. We're going to go to our anchor, and we're going to anchor it to the bottom. Then we're going to go over to custom, and we're going to go into our anchor points, our anchor offsets. And we're going to, actually, we don't need to make any changes. This looks good for right now. And then we're going to go into our theme overrides, our styles, and we will create a style box flat. Can click into this, and I'm just going to use in the raw, we're going to do 0.13 for all of them. And then we're going to do 0.66 for the alpha. So it's a little bit darker, but we can see through, so it won't override the whole screen. Inside of the margin container, we are going to make this a full rect, and we're going to give it some custom constants. So in here, we're going to do 10s across the board. Then we can go into our VBox container. We're going to go into the theme overrides and add a separation of 10. Then we're going to go to our name label, and we're going to do a couple of theme overrides here as well. You can make a new theme resource for this if you want, but I'm just going to do this really quickly and use the bidi file, and then the font size for our name label is going to be 32. Let's actually give it a PC name just so we can actually see what this is going to look like. Then we're going to go to our dialog label, and we're going to go into layout, and we're going to give this a custom minimum size of 370 by 90. Then we're going to go into our theme overrides and do the same thing here, except font size is going to be 16, so a little bit smaller, and the font is still going to be bidi. And we want to also turn on our auto wrap mode on words, so that words will start wrapping when we get to the end. So we'll get some example text. And if I copy and paste this a lot, you'll see, there we go. We have that wrapping properly. Then we're going to go to our continue label. And let's do the same thing with the font. So let's go to our theme overrides, font, bidi, and we'll do size 16 here. Our text is going to be press E to continue. We want to horizontal align this on the right, and that should be it for that. Now we can move on to our script. So let's save that. We can head over to the script. Just gonna get rid of this real quick, and let's get the variables set up that we need right now and signals. So we're gonna have one signal, dialog finished. So whenever the dialog sequence is done, we're going to emit this signal. We need onReady variables for all 3 of our labels. Oops. we're also going to need the panel. And we're going to have a couple of constants. One is going to be our character read rate, which is going to be a float, and it's going to be 0.05. So this is going to be the seconds between each character that's written to the screen. And then our next constant is going to be our punctuation pause, which is also a float. And we're going to default this to 0.02. So we're going to have an extra pause whenever we hit certain punctuation. Then we're going to set up a couple of regular variables. One is going to be our current dialogue, which is an array of dictionaries. And we're going to default this to an empty array. Then we're going to have another one, which is our current page index, which is an integer. We'll default to 0. And we're going to have an is dialog active boolean, which we will default to false. And finally, we will have an is text revealing boolean, which is also going to be false on the default. Okay, and before we actually start writing out the details of each of these methods, let's just set up the bones of all of them. So we're going to have a ready method. We're going to have an unhandled input method. We're going to have a method called start dialog, which is going to take in what we're going to call dialog data, which is an array of dictionaries. It's not going to return anything. Then we're going to have show current page, which is not going to return anything. We're going to have a function called reveal text, which is going to take in some text, which is of a type string. It's not going to return anything. Then we have finish text reveal, which does not return anything either. And a function called try advanced dialog. And finally, we're going to have hide dialog. Okay, so now that we have all of these, let's actually go in and start building these out. So up in our ready method, first thing we're going to do is set our process mode to be always. Then second, we want to hide our dialog since we don't want it showing when this loads up. And then we also want to make sure that we're not allowing pause, or not allowing you to hit pause when the dialog is up. So we want to get a variable for our pause menu. We're going to get node or null. We're going to go to the root, check for a pause menu. If we have a pause menu, the pause menu process mode is going to equal to disabled. Pause menu. Okay. In unhandled input, what we're going to do first is we have to do an if check on if the dialog is active. If it's not, we're going to return and not do anything. If it is, we're going to check on our event, and if action pressed on UI accept, which is going to be our spacebar, we're going to get the viewport and set input as handled. So we're going to just take in the input event, and we're going to check if the text is revealing. We're going to finish our text reveal. Otherwise, we're going to try and advance the dialog. So that's all we have to do there. In start dialog, we need to initialize our dialog state with new data. So the first thing we're going to do is get our current dialog, and we're going to assign it to the dialog data we passed in. We're going to get the current page index and set it to 0. And we're going to set is dialog active to true. Then we're going to get tree so we can pause. We're going to access our panel and actually show it. And then we can start to do show current page. Inside of show current page, we are going to get a variable we're going to call page, which is a dictionary. And it's going to equal to our current dialog and our current page at our current page index. And this is going to make more sense when we go into our MPC and make the MPC class. The way that we're going to be handling dialogue is going to be in a dictionary. So we're going to be accessing specific messages in our dialogue at indexes because it's going to be a list of arrays. It's going to be an array of dictionaries. But for right now, just follow with me and we'll get to that shortly. Then we want to tap into our name label on the text. We're going to do page.get, get the name. And if we don't have it, we're just going to return this. And let me actually get an example of what our dialog data is going to look like, just so this makes a little bit more sense. All right, so I'm pasting this in. This is what our example dialog is going to look like. So you can see how we're going to access this. We're going to get the text, and inside of this is going to be our page. We're going to get the key at name, and then we're going to pass in the NPC name. Then we're going to get our dialog label and assign the text to an empty string. We just want to make sure that we clear out any previous text before we actually start writing to the dialog label. And then the continue label, we are going to hide for right now. Lastly, we need to actually reveal text, and we're going to pass in the page.get at the text. And if there is nothing, we're going to give it an empty string. In reveal text, we are going to set is text revealing to true. And we're going to have a for loop where we are going to loop through the range of our text length. And then we're going to add every character that we're going to get to the dialog label. So the text is going to equal, we're going to grab the text and get a substring of it at 0 and 0, or I plus 1. Then we need to calculate our pause durations. So we're going to get something we call wait time, which is a float, and we're just going to default it to our constant of the character read rate. And we're going to look at text at the index of I. It's in this list of punctuation. So we could probably make this a constant as well, but we're not going to do that for right now. Do that one. We're going to do a question mark. And lastly, we're going to do a comma. So if any of the characters are in this, we're going to change the wait time to equal our punctuation pause. Then we need to do an await on get tree. We're going to create a timer on our wait time, and then on timeout. And if not is text revealing, we break. Otherwise, we go outside of the for loop and we finish our text reveal. In finish text reveal, we are going to show the complete text immediately. So we're going to get to our dialog label.text. We're going to look at our current dialog at the current page index. And we're going to get text and have our default. Then we are going to set is text revealing to false. And then we tap into our continue label and we show it. In our try advanced dialog, we're going to tap into our current page index and add 1 to it. And we're going to do an if check to see if we've shown all the pages. So we're going to look at our current page index. If it's greater than or equal to the current dialog size, then we hide our dialog. Else, we show current page. Lastly, in hide dialog, we're going to hide our panel. We're going to set is dialog active to false. Set our current dialog to clear. We're going to unpause the game. So we're going to get tree paused, set that to false. And then we're going to emit our dialog finished signal. Okay, so that was a lot of code. We don't really have much to show for it right now. So let's move on to creating our NPC so we can actually start implementing this. So I'm going to go into our scenes. I'm going to create a new folder and call it NPC. And inside of this, I'm going to create a new scene, and it's going to be of the character body 2D type. I'm going to call it NPC. We can go up here. I'm going to rename it to be all caps. I'm going to change this to be a character body 2D. Let's go to the 2D. Let's save, and we can just immediately attach a script to it as well. We're going to need that. We can get rid of all this extra stuff. We'll give it a class name while we're here. And done. Okay. So since this is our base class, we have to get the things that are going to be required for an NPC. First thing is going to be a sprite 2D. The second thing is going to be a collision shape. The third thing is going to be an area 2D, which we are going to rename to interaction area. This interaction area is going to need a collision shape also. And lastly, we are going to have a canvas layer and a label as a child, which we are going to call our interaction label. Then we want to click into our NPC and go to the collision. We don't need it to mask on anything, but we do want to make sure it's on a proper layer. So right now, layer 1 is for our player. We don't have anything for our NPC. So we're going to set up layer 2 and just call it NPC and make sure that our NPC is assigned to layer 2. Then we go to our interaction area, and our collision layer can also be 2, but we do need to have a mask on 1 because this does need to look out for our player. Canvas layer, we should not need to do anything to, but our interaction label, we are going to make some changes. The first thing we're going to do is go into our layout, and we're going to give it a custom minimum size of 200 by 400. Oh, by 40, not 400. We're going to anchor it in the center. The position, this should be fine for right now. Then we're going to go to our theme overrides, and we're going to do the same thing here. Load in our bitty font and give it a font size of 16. This didn't stay anchored to the center, so just want to make sure it's anchored to the center. We want to do an alignment on horizontal for center. And we don't want this to be visible right away, so our canvas layer can be turned off. Or no, we don't want to do that, actually. Can we do it in here? Yeah, turn the visibility off inside of the interaction label. Now we can go into our script, and let's get the onReady variable references right now. So we're going to need our sprite 2D, we're going to need our interaction area and our interaction label. We're going to have 2 export variables. One is going to be the NPC name, which is a string, and we can default this to just be NPC. We're going to have an export variable of our interaction text, which is going to be what's going to display above our NPC's head, telling them, press E to interact. So that's actually what we're going to do for our default here, is press E to talk, which we need to set that up in our input mappings, which we'll do before the end of this. We're going to have a variable for direction, which is an integer, and we're going to default this to -1. So this is going to be the direction that our NPC is facing, and we're always going to have the NPC face our player. And we're going to have an interactable Boolean. We're going to default to true. We're going to have a variable for our dialog UI. It's going to be of the type dialog UI. I'm going to do the same thing here. We're just going to get our base methods ready. We're going to have our ready and process methods. We're going to have our unhandled input method. Then we need to have a method called on interaction area entered. Just going to take in a body, type node 2D. It's not going to return anything. And then we need this for when we exit as well. On interaction area exited. Also takes a body, and it's of type node 2D. And we need a method for set direction. And then we have 3 more that we need. We're going to have a handle interaction method. We're going to have an on dialog finished. And lastly, we're going to have get dialog content, which is going to return an array of dictionary. And this is going to be where I showed the example of earlier. That's where I got this from. So now that we have this, let's actually go and update that. We'll start with that method first. So we are going to uncomment this, and we're going to return. So this is just going to be dialogue that we're going to override. This is never going to be something that we actually want our NPC to say, but this is just going to be, if we don't give them any dialogue content, this is what's going to happen. Okay, so let's go back up to our ready, and we need to start with an await on our get tree on the process frame. So we want to make sure the scene and everything is fully loaded. Then we're going to go and get our interaction label and hide it. We did turn off the visibility, but just in case, Then we're going to connect to our interaction areas signals. We're going to go on our body entered. We're going to connect. We're going to connect to the on interaction area entered. Just make sure you get rid of the parentheses. And then we're going to do the same thing on the body exited. And make sure you connect to the right method. Then we need to go into our dialog UI. We're going to find the get node or null. And we're going to do something similar to what we've done before. Go to the root and search for the dialog UI. And if we don't get one, we are going to preload one. So let's go into our dialog. We want to preload the scene. So preload, drag it over, but we want to instantiate it. Then we need to get tree. On the root, we want to add a child, not the method, and we want to call deferred and pop in our dialog UI. Okay, down in process, the only thing that we're going to be doing is set direction. We're not using delta, so we can preface this with an underscore. In unhandled input, we're going to do a check on if we're not interactable. We're going to return. Then we're going to do if event is action pressed, interact, which we'll set up right after we finish this if statement. We are going to get viewport, and we're going to handle our interaction. So let's go set up interact in our project settings right now. So we're going to go to our input map. We're going to add interact. And for me, I'm going to put this on the E key. Then on interaction area entered, we're going to do if not body is player or we're not interactable. We return. So we want to make sure our player is a player and it is interactable. Then we can tap into our interaction labels text, set it to the interaction text. Then we're going to get our viewport size, which is a variable we have to create. It's going to be a vector2, and it's going to be equal to get viewport rect dot size. So what we're going to be doing here is we're going to be getting the label's position and make sure that it's placed above our NPC's head, so we can dynamically be putting via code the label on top of our NPC. So we need to get the label position, which is also a vector2, going to equal to the global position. And then we are going to do our label position on the y-axis. We're going to subtract 80 from it because that's how it's going to make it go above our character. This might need to change based on your specific sprites, but for us, this should be a good amount for us. We could probably make this a constant as well, but for right now, we're just going to make it 80. Then we're going to get the label position's x-axis. We're going to subtract our interaction labels size on the x-axis divided by 2. We're going to get our label position x. We're going to clamp it on the label position x 0, the viewport size on the x minus the interaction labels size on the x. Then we have to do the same thing for the y. So I'm going to copy and paste this, and we're going to change each x here to just be y. Okay, then we have to do our interaction labels. Interactions label. We want to get the position of that. And now we want to set it to our label position. And then we can show it. Then in our interaction area exited, we just want to hide the label. So if the body is player, we get in our interaction label, we just hide it. In set direction, this is something that we've done before. I believe it was actually inside of our enemy script. Let me see if I can find this real quick. Yeah, it's this. So we are going to just copy this and we'll go back to our NPC script. I'm just going to paste this in here. That will not change. This will need to be sprite 2D. So I guess it does change it a little bit because I did not update that at the top on the onReady variable. Then on handle interaction, we need to check if we're not interactable. We're going to return. Otherwise, we set interactable to false. We go into our dialog UI, tap into the dialog finished signal, connect to it, pass in our onDialog finish, and we are going to do connect one shot. And lastly, on our dialog UI, we start dialog and we pass in the get dialog content. This, we do want the entire thing. Extra parentheses here, but we do want these parentheses. On dialog finished, we want to do interactable equal to true. So after the dialog is all done, that NPC is able to be interacted with again. And then here's our base dialog. Some of this, like this one, is going to get overridden when we make our tutorial NPC class. So we can move on to that right now. Okay, so let's go create our guide NPC. So we're going to create a 2D scene. We're going to change the type to be a character body 2D. I'm going to name this our guide NPC. Let's save this into our NPC folder. We're also going to attach a script to it. We can create this. We're going to call this our guide NPC. And we're not going to extend character body. We're going to extend NPC. We can get rid of all this stuff for right now. But now we need to make sure that we have all the same inherited nodes here. So we have sprite 2D. We're going to have a collision shape. We're going to have an area 2D, which we need to call interaction area. That's going to need a collision shape. We're going to need a canvas layer. And then we are going to need a label, which is a child of canvas layer and is called interaction label. This is also going to need an animation player since we're going to have a idle animation for our sprite. So let's make this sprite now. I have the NPC asset referenced. We're going to drag this over here. Let me get rid of this. Okay, so in animation, it's going to be 6 on horizontal and 7 vertical. We're going to want to be on frame 18. I'm just going to drag this. Ooh, wrong thing. I'm going to drag this so it's on the x-axis. We can save that. That's all we need to do here. And now we can go into our animation player and let's just make, we're going to call default. It's going to be 1.1 seconds. We want it to loop and we want it to autoplay on load. And the snap is going to be at 0.1. So now we can go back to our sprite and let's just start keying in these frames one by one. And so we start on 18 and then just key everything in. Oh, sorry, it's not going to be that much. So this can actually be, what is it, 0.6? 0.5. So now we play this, we have a nice looping idle animation. We can go back to our top here on the guide NPC. We're going to rename this guide, just guide, oops, just guide, and press E to talk is fine for our interaction text for now. And now we can move on to the script. So the only onReady variable we're going to need is our animation player. Then we can go right into our ready method. And the only thing we're going to do is tap in to our parent NPC and get everything from the ready there. And we also are going to add to it our default animation. So this super is going to take everything from our NPC's ready method, but we wanted to add something to it. So we wanted to just also have this. If we didn't have anything else to put in this ready, we wouldn't need this ready method at all. And we're going to override the get dialog content, which returns an array of type dictionary. And the way that we're going to do this is we're going to check if our player has double jump, which was a method we created on our player. Pass for now, or we'll return something then, and then otherwise we're going to do something else. So I'm going to copy and paste the text in right now because it's going to be a little bit long. You guys can pause and type this in yourselves, but let me just copy and paste this in right now. Okay, so if you want to pause here, this would be a good time to write this. You can also write whatever you want. We just want to have some text in here so that we can have several pages for our NPC to flip through. And the last thing we want to do is we're going to override on dialog finished, which doesn't return anything. And what we're going to do is if the player has double jump, we're going to make this NPC no longer be interactable. Otherwise, we're going to leave it as true. So if we have double jump, you don't need to see this message about double jumping or how you get it anymore. But if you don't have it, you'll be able to come back to the NPC and actually interact again. Okay, so that was a lot of typing. We should be able to test out our scene now. So let's go to our level 2, play it. Yep, I should add an NPC to our scene first. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to see it. So go to our NPC. I'm going to put our guide NPC over here so we can jump on either side. And that also reminds me, we need to go back to our guide NPC and we need to put the collision shape for our interaction area. Otherwise, there's going to be no area for our player to be detected in. So let's create a rectangle shape. I'm going to make this a little bit wider than our player. Like our player doesn't have to be directly on top of her to be able to interact. So we'll do this. Now let's go back to our level 2 and try and play it. Okay, so we're getting it a little bit. The direction is flipped, so the copy and paste wasn't the right thing to do. I have to go flip the 1 and -1. We also want this press E to talk on top of our head, and we also want it to be in our font. So the easiest thing to do right now, we're going to go back to our NPC script, and we can go down to set direction, and we need to flip these. So let's quickly test this. Make sure that the NPC is now looking at us. Okay, cool. All right, that's done. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to try and tackle is the font issue on top of the NPC, or the press E to interact. So there's got to be something going on with our interaction label. Do have the font selected here. I guess just to be sure, let's go into our interaction label here. And we're going to quick load biddy, pop this at 12. Let's save that and see if that gets us fixed here. Okay, that has us fixed. That looks a little small though, so let's make that a little bit bigger. So I think we want to do that at 16 instead. All right, let's do one last check on this just to make sure it looks decent. Okay, that's better, but we don't want it off the screen, and we want it above our NPC's head. So I think we're going to have to do some more stuff on the side of our NPC script, specifically in the interaction area entered. So this label stuff has not been working exactly how we want it to work. So we can keep a decent amount of this stuff, but we're going to add some more. So the first thing we're going to do is get another variable for our viewport rect, which is a rect2, and we're going to get the viewport rect. Then we need to get our camera center, which is going to be a vector2. It's going to be equal to our player's camera, our player camera. We're going to get the screen center position. I have another variable called our screen position. It's going to be a vector2, and it's going to be equal to the global position minus the camera center plus the viewport rect, the size, divided by 2. Then our label position is going to be equal to our screen position now. We no longer need the viewport size. And this should all be able to stay. Except this needs to be viewport rect size now. and it needs to be dot size. All right, let's check this out, see if this helped. All right, there we are. So I don't, yeah, let's see. It looks pretty good. So when we press E now, if I hit space, there we go. I did notice that this guide jumped up a little bit though. I don't really like that. But if you press space when we get to E to continue, there we go, press space and it finishes it, and bam. We should be able to interact again. All right. Let's see, okay, looks like it's centered every time we're there. Now let's go to, let's see if we can make one final change. So let's go back to our dialog UI. I think what we need to do is go into the margin container and get rid of these. I think that's what was causing the issue with the text loading up. So if we go back and run this scene now, yeah, now we're good. It's just the margins. I don't like how it's all the way up against the sides of it, but this is just going to be our first iteration. In the next video, we're going to be working on actually using sprites to replace this pretty ugly just black box. So that will be in our next video.